Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there is a ton of news stories to get into today, so let's talk about Impact Wrestling. Of course, Slammiversary is only a couple of days away at this point. We're talking like 48 hours away, Slammiversary, so it's a very exciting time for Impact Wrestling. But we have an update today about possibly Impact Wrestling working with a plethora of other promotions. The last 18 months or so with the pandemic has been the beginning of the forbidden door, hasn't it? Impact Wrestling working with AEW, with New Japan Pro Wrestling, AEW working with the NWA, working with New Japan Pro Wrestling as well. There's so much discussion at the moment about companies working together that previously hadn't. The pandemic kind of forced that to happen, and it would appear that Impact Wrestling is on good terms with a lot of other companies and wants to work with a lot of other companies as well. Now, this starts from the NWA Impact Wrestling Kylie Rae deal. Now, Kylie Rae, of course, was at one point with Impact Wrestling. She was scheduled to win the Knockouts Championship at Bound for Glory last year. Now, obviously, she didn't appear at the events. She then had a hiatus from professional wrestling. She announced that she had retired as a professional wrestler. Suddenly, earlier this year, in 2021, after that hiatus, she popped up in the NWA, and people said, well, isn't she still under contract with Impact Wrestling? She signed a multi-year deal with Impact Wrestling, I believe, last year. So a lot of people were saying, how did that work out? Now, subsequently, it was reported that Kylie Rae and the NWA had negotiated a release from Impact Wrestling, and she had signed a contract with the NWA. Well, this whole working relationship with Impact Wrestling with the likes of NWA, MLW, Ring of Honor, etc. stems from the Kylie Rae deal. Now, Fightful Select, Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful over at Fightful Select, that's their Patreon service, has released a report today talking about how this Kylie Rae Impact Wrestling NWA deal came together and how it affects a working relationship for Impact with the likes of the NWA, with MLW, with Ring of Honor going forward. Now, this is what the report says, quote, "We've learned more about the Impact NWA deal that allowed Kylie Rae to sign with the National Wrestling Alliance. Fightful have been told that the former Simon Diamond, Pat Kenny, at one point was a producer behind the scenes with Impact Wrestling. I'm not sure if he still is or he's working with the NWA. Either way, Pat Kenny was instrumental in making the deal happen, as he still maintains a great relationship with Scott D'Amore. So I would believe he's probably working with the NWA right now, and having a good relationship with Scott D'Amore from his time in Impact Wrestling, he was the one to reach out to make this deal happen. Now, Impact Wrestling specifically was said to have been really excited to have worked with another company, and Fightful have been giving an indication that there could be further talent hopping between the two companies in the coming months. Those two companies, of course, being the NWA and Impact Wrestling. Now, Impact sources have also indicated to Fightful there is no animosity between Impact Wrestling and MLW. Of course, they once had a working relationship together a couple of years ago. That kind of fizzled out, and there was believed to be some heat over that at the time. This report is stating that's not the case. There is no bad blood between Impact and MLW, and Impact Wrestling wants to do business with MLW in the future. Fightful are also reporting that the relationship between Ring of Honor and Impact Wrestling is, quote, as friendly as it's ever been, and they're happy that there's been a major shift in mentality of working together. That's significant as well, considering the whole Destination America fiasco that happened a few years ago as well between those two companies. It would appear right now Ring of Honor, ROH, and Impact Wrestling are on as good a terms as they've ever been right now, which I think is significant when it comes to stars possibly coming in to Impact Wrestling in the future. Bear with me, we'll go back to that in a second. Now, the report finishes by saying Fightful have been told there have been talks of NWA and Impact Wrestling working together more after a period where they didn't at all. Now, that is fascinating as well, because, of course, the president, the owner of the National Wrestling Alliance, is none other than Billy Corgan, who obviously has a ton of history with Impact Wrestling, not a lot of it very good. Obviously, at one period of time, he was the president of Impact Wrestling, wanted to purchase Impact Wrestling from Dixie Carter and Panda Energy. It got very Game of Thrones. There ended up being lawsuits, litigation. He thought the company had been signed over to him, but the contract he was given wasn't even applicable in Nashville law, even though it was signed by a Nashville lawyer. Again, there was litigation going back and forth. Eventually, it gets settled. I don't think Billy Corgan made any money out of it. I think he got his money back that he invested into the company, but he was very, very sour on Impact Wrestling for a long period of time. Even recently, he's done interviews, and he's not exactly massively thrilled with the company. I think a lot of that's aimed towards Dixie Carter, not so much towards Impact Wrestling, in fairness, but he's also said some things about the current regime in Impact Wrestling, where he talked about Impact Wrestling possibly stealing a talent away from the NWA. Some people have said they think that's to do with Willie Mack, who was once the national heavyweight champion for the National Wrestling Alliance. But it would appear that the lines of communication, the lines of dialogue are open between the two promotions. They're both interested in working together in the future. They have kind of worked together in the past. That must be stressed there. There was an empty arena match between Tim Storm and the late Josephus. That took place inside the Impact Zone. So it's not as if these two companies haven't worked with each other in the past. It's just Billy Corgan has so much baggage with Impact Wrestling, and I think he would have at one point been very, very happy if the NWA just absolutely destroyed Impact Wrestling, but that's not going to happen. Now, the fact that Impact Wrestling are very open and want to do business with a lot of these other companies is very interesting going forward. Why is it very interesting? Well, obviously, coming into Slammiversary on Saturday, there's been a lot of discussion about the former WWE stars that are now free to sign with Impact Wrestling, or at the very least appear at Slammiversary on Saturday. Those names like the Iconics, like Mickie James, etc., like Chelsea Green. A lot of people have expected, myself included, that they would show up at Slammiversary on Saturday. Now, in the likes of Chelsea Green, she appeared at the Ring of Honor Best in the World pay-per-view last weekend, and a lot of people said, well, that means no Chelsea Green. No Chelsea Green at Slammiversary next Saturday. She's with Ring of Honor. She's going to be exclusive to ROH. That's going to happen there. Some people said the same thing about Mickie James. Of course, Mickie James has made some appearances on NWA Power. She's going to be the executive producer of the NWA Empower all-female pay-per-view. She's also going to be wrestling the following night at the NWA's 73rd anniversary pay-per-view event as well. So some people said, well, that rules out Mickie James from going into Impact. That rules out Chelsea Green from going into Impact because Chelsea Green's with ROH. Mickie James is with the NWA. This report changes things. Because the report initially when it comes to Chelsea Green was that, yes, she's going to be doing commentary for that women's tournament. I think she eventually might wrestle in it as well. I think that was the case. But she hadn't signed a contract with Ring of Honor. And as I mentioned on the video that I did on it previously, that did open the door for her still to appear with Impact Wrestling. The same comes with Mickie James. We're not sure if Mickie James has indeed signed a contract with the NWA. I have a feeling she's bought into the company because I know for a fact Nick Aldis does own a part of the National Wrestling Alliance. If Nick Aldis owns it, Mickie James basically owns it as well, considering they're husband and wife. So that's interesting too. But the fact that Impact Wrestling are very open and want to work with these other companies says to me, even if a Chelsea Green is going to appear for Ring of Honor in their women's division, they still want her to appear for Impact Wrestling. Even though Mickie James is going to be appearing for the NWA, they still want her to appear for Impact Wrestling. So this is kind of an open border policy right now, that a lot of these talents, when they're leaving WWE, they don't really want to sign exclusive deals with just one promotion. And the fact that Impact Wrestling have good relationships right now with MLW, with Ring of Honor, with the National Wrestling Alliance says to me we're going to be seeing a lot of contracts going forward where they're not exclusive to one company. We're going to be seeing situations where Chelsea Green is making appearances for ROH and for Impact Wrestling as well. And we're going to see situations where several Impact Wrestling knockouts are going to appear at the NWA Empower pay-per-view events as well. And we're going to see NWA names come over to Impact Wrestling, and we're possibly going to see some crossover with MLW as well. That's a very exciting time. I think it's smart. I think it's very smart by Impact Wrestling because I don't think they want to lose out. I don't think they want to lose out on a talent by saying to, say, a Chelsea Green. I don't think they want to lose out and say, you have to sign with us, you can only sign with us, you've got to be exclusive to us. Impact Wrestling, frankly, haven't done that for a while. They've been very open with their contracts. Sometimes they don't even offer out contracts. They say, just come in for a TV taping or two. You can still work with New Japan in the sense of the Good Brothers and several of Impact Wrestling talents as well. And they did it before with EC3 last year. He had already agreed to go to ROH first, and because they were on hiatus, he said to ROH, can I work for Impact in the meantime? They said yes, so he came in and did the angle with Moose. It's a very exciting time, and the pandemic, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the pandemic kind of forced these working relationships between these smaller promotions, even a bigger one like AEW, but it forced these working relationships because it was kind of out of necessity to survive and to shock and to get people talking. They needed to work together. There was a concern, there still is a concern, frankly, that now we're coming out of, not coming out of the pandemic, but now that there's light at the end of the tunnel and there's going to be return to touring and live fans returning, etc., there is a concern that these smaller companies are going to get very territorial again and they're not going to want to work with each other. As far as this report by Fightful is saying, that's not the case. They want to work with other companies because I think they realize that, look, the way Impact Wrestling tapes television, and I think they would look at the success they've had by working with New Japan, by working with AEW over the course of the last 18 months or so. They realize it only benefits us. It only benefits us. And I know there's been some criticisms about maybe the ratings, and some people, if they think the Kenny Omega experiment has worked or not with Impact Wrestling, that's a debate for another time. But I think they realize, Impact Wrestling, that if they didn't have this working relationship, they don't have Kenny Omega on their show. And I think now the eyes are starting to be opened a little bit because they're saying to themselves, wait a minute, if we have these working relationships with Ring of Honor, with MLW, with the NWA, who's to say we can't get Nick Aldis on our show? Who's to say we can't get Hammerstone on our show, and Fatu, and all of these other names? Who's to say that can't happen? It can. And our talent can go and get some exposure elsewhere. It's worked out pretty well with AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling, and they want to extend that. So any concern that people would have had previously, that names like Chelsea Green, names like Mickie James, both who have been rumored to be facing Deonna Purrazzo this coming Saturday at Slammiversary, any concern they had of, well, they're already with other companies, it opens the door. Anything's possible right now. It's a very exciting time in the world of professional wrestling, with the return of fans as we now go back to AEW and WWE touring, and fans returning to Impact Wrestling and other tapings and promotions as well. It's a really exciting time, but we've also got to take the good things out of the pandemic into this new world of professional wrestling now. And one of those good things is, as I mentioned before, is the smaller companies working together, getting those working relationships going. So this is a very, very, very exciting time, and it's a very exciting story right before Slammiversary on Saturday. That to me is a really exciting story as we're heading into Slammiversary. And who would have known it comes from Kylie Rae, or at least that opens the dialogue between the NWA and Impact Wrestling. That's very exciting as well. Now, I've seen recently on a few videos, people have been asking me, where's Taylor Wilde? And I didn't have an answer. The reason I wasn't really responding is because I don't have an answer. I didn't have an answer, but now we do. Because Impact Wrestling star and veteran Taylor Wilde has explained the reason behind her absence from the weekly broadcasts in recent weeks. Now, after a decade-long hiatus from the promotion, Taylor Wilde returned to Impact earlier this year at the Rebellion event, where she attacked current Knockouts champion Deonna Purrazzo. She even competed the following month at the Under Siege event, where she emerged victorious in a tag team match. Now, many people on the channel, in the comment section, myself included, expected bigger things and a big storyline to come. I thought she was doing arguably some of the best work of her whole career after she returned to Impact Wrestling, but she kind of disappeared. She remained absent from several Impact Wrestling shows, and no one really knew why. Now, she recently appeared as a guest on the Wrestling Perspective podcast. She discussed numerous topics and most notably addressed the reason behind her recent absence from Impact Wrestling television. She revealed that ongoing issues in her life had prompted her to miss a couple of Impact Wrestling television tapings. However, she added she will now be available as soon as, to return as soon as, I guess, Slammiversary and the tapings the following week. This is what she had to say, quote, yes, I'm effing back. I had a little bit of a life crisis. It happens. I seem to be pretty competent in my career as a mother, but in other aspects of my life have not been so stellar, so I've closed another chapter. It was a slight interruption in my wrestling comeback, but whatever. Taylor Wilde, I'm effing wild, so I'm back. So there you go. Taylor Wilde admitted that, yes, she was absent for a while. She had some things going on in her personal life, but she's coming back. She'll be back as soon as the television tapings against, as I mentioned, for Slammiversary, maybe even Saturday, and obviously the following week's television tapings as well. There's been some discussion she could be the mystery opponent for Deonna Purrazzo. I don't see that, if I'm going to be honest with you. The reason I say I don't see that is because, not that would be underwhelming, but I think a lot of people, when we're having this mystery opponent, I think a lot of people are thinking it's going to be a former WWE star, whether that's Chelsea Green, whether that's Mickie James, whether it's both of the Iconics. I don't think it's going to be Taylor Wilde. Look, if it is, it'll be a good match, but I think people might have a little bit, they might be a little bit let down by that one. So I don't think that's going to be the case. One person it could be is the AEW Women's World Champion Britt Baker, because reportedly she's spoken to Scott D'Amore about possibly wanting to come into Impact Wrestling. Now, Britt Baker and Deonna Purrazzo, they've been on top of the wrestling world for a while now, and both for their respective and valid reasons. Both have arguably been two of the best female competitors outside of WWE in the pandemic era. Deonna Purrazzo is one of the best female wrestlers in the world right now, and Britt Baker is obviously the most over female performer on the AEW roster right now. Now, of course, AEW and Impact Wrestling, they have a working relationship. Of course, the AEW and Impact World Champion is current AEW wrestler Kenny Omega. We've also seen appearances from AEW stars such as Matt Hardy, Private Party, and even the president of AEW, Tony Khan, on episodes of Impact Wrestling as well. But we're yet to see a female crossover of an AEW female talent coming over to compete inside the Impact Zone. Well, that could change in the future, because on a recent episode of Vicky Guerrero's podcast, Impact Wrestling Executive Vice President Scott D'Amore noted that AEW Women's Champion Britt Baker is eager to face Impact Wrestling's Knockouts Champion Deonna Purrazzo. Now, D'Amore praised the relationship between AEW and Impact and said he was quite open to the idea, because why wouldn't he be? Of course, that benefits Impact Wrestling. This is what he had to say, quote, "That's a great question, and look, I get it tweeted out at me and everything all the time. All I can say is, from our perspective, look, I got cornered by Britt Baker in Jacksonville a few weeks ago, and she's like, when do I get Deonna? And I said, hey, Britt, oh, come on. We've always said we have an open door policy, and we're open to doing it. You know the deal in wrestling. Sometimes there's a lot of hurdles to jump through, but I think the relationship with AEW has been fantastic." Now, Britt Baker answering the challenge against Deonna Purrazzo on Saturday night at Slammiversary. Now, that would be a worthy open challenge surprise. Do I think that's going to be the case? No, I will be honest, I don't think that's going to be the case, but I think that can happen in the future. I really do. I think the point of contention with all of that might be where either Impact or AEW want to do it. I think, for me, the better presentation of women's wrestling is in Impact Wrestling. I think they have a better division than AEW. I've been critical of the AEW women's division. I think they have improved it. My worry that I have is still the same, is that, you know, the AEW women's division was making great strides and great momentums in the first half of this year. I thought the match between Britt Baker and Hikaru Shida at Double or Nothing was excellent, and I thought it was a great presentation of what their women's division is capable of. The crowd was into it. Of course, you had the Britt Baker Thunder Rosa match earlier this year on Dynamite as well. That was the first time they actually main evented an episode of Dynamite, finally. And I thought, right, finally, we're getting a bit of change here. And since that victory at Double or Nothing, a lot of the female talents just haven't appeared on Dynamite, whether it's Hikaru Shida, whether it's Thunder Rosa. We're back to where we were before, where it's one segment per show. Get Britt Baker out there, maybe in a match with Nyla Rose, or Nyla Rose has a squash, but it felt very odd, very, very odd, and I don't know why they've gone back to that. So for me, if I want to see a Deonna Purrazzo versus Britt Baker match, which I do, I would prefer to have it in Impact Wrestling, because I think in Impact it's a main event. I think in Impact Wrestling that can main event a pay-per-view. I think that can main event an episode of Impact Wrestling. The question would be, does it main event in AEW? No. Would it be a bigger exposure? Yes, irrespective of if it's in the main event or not. So that's a tough question, and I think that would be the difficult thing to figure out. For me, I would prefer it happens in Impact. I really wouldn't be against having a similar situation that they've had with Kenny Omega, in that, you know, you had the Rich Swann versus Kenny Omega title versus title match, AEW World title versus Impact World title earlier this year at Rebellion. I wouldn't mind seeing a similar match in the future. Where it would happen, I don't know, maybe Bound for Glory later this year, of title versus title, Britt Baker versus Deonna Purrazzo. I think what should happen, though, in that sense, I think Deonna Purrazzo should win, and I think that kind of backdoors her to appear more regularly on Impact, on AEW rather, and then we can get some more female matches, well, maybe it's Deonna Purrazzo versus Thunder Rosa, or Deonna Purrazzo versus Hikaru Shida. Those names are very exciting, and I think that's matches I would really like to see. Whether or not that happens or not, I don't know. I think Britt Baker would be an excellent surprise that I don't think a lot of people see coming for Slammiversary. Again, if you pushed me and you said, oh, do you think it's going to happen? No. I think the most likely names to be facing Deonna Purrazzo on Saturday is Chelsea Green or Mickie James. Maybe the Iconics as well. One of them, maybe both of them. I don't know. So, but Break it's not impossible. It's not impossible at all. And who knows? That would be very exciting. And that certainly would be something out of left field. And it's not impossible. I just think it's unlikely for Saturday, but who knows? Finally, we have an Impact preview for tonight as well. Of course, it's the Slammiversary Go Home edition of Impact Wrestling on Access TV. Obviously, Impact are going to be hoping they have some bigger ratings than they've had in the last few weeks. So we have some matches announced for the show. We have a battle of the Hosses, in which Willie Mack goes up against Fowler Bar, Doc Gallows, and Joe Doring. Of course, this is heading into the Impact World Tag Team title match, where Violent by Design defends against Rich Swann and Willie Mack, TJP and Fowler Bar, and the Good Brothers at Slammiversary. I'm a big fan of Joe Doring. I've said this several times, so I don't know if Joe Doring, I would see maybe Doc Gallows winning this one, but I'm excited for the tag match at Slammiversary on Saturday. We also have, of course, the Ultimate X match returning on Saturday at Slammiversary as well. So tonight we've got Ace Austin, Madman Fulton, Rohit, and Shira facing off against the X Division champion Josh Alexander, Trey Miguel, Petey Williams, and Chris Bay as well. That's going to be an 8-man tag team match. That should be very exciting. We also have Havoc going up against Tasha Steelz. Of course, that's hyping up the Knockouts Tag Team Championship match to come on Saturday as well. I would expect Havoc to get the victory on that one because I don't think Fire and Flame are going to drop the championships on Saturday. We also have a kind of intergender match, sort of, in which we have, I mean, it is intergender. We've got Tenille Dashwood and Caleb Wither-Kay facing off against Jordan Grace and Rachel Ellering. Look, this Jordan Grace and Rachel Ellering, I know they're back together now, but I do think they're going to split once again eventually, so I think that continues there. We've got Moose going up against Hernandez as well. And we've also got before the Impact match, we've got Chris Sabin against Johnny Swinger, which should be interesting in that one. And that's all that's been announced so far for the Go Home edition of Impact Wrestling before Slammiversary. I'm sure we'll get some Kenny Omega, Sami Callihan stuff as well. So that should be exciting. But look, guys, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on all of these Impact Wrestling news stories we've spoken about today? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about Impact Wrestling, AEW, WWE, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community. Drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube. Go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or having come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.